Are you looking to grow revenues, increase profitability, or obtain financing? If so, you came to the right place.
Running a business is all about leadership. How do you become a better leader? Learn from the successful entrepreneurs and business owners how to lead your organization more effectively. That's why we created Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business, to help you succeed with your host, Andrew Frazier, Business Growth Pro and CFO and founder of the Small Business Pro University. Every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern, we're joined by experienced entrepreneurs and business owners who share their secrets to success via Livestream. Also, every Friday morning, we release a new podcast episode. Either way, you will learn about developing your business leadership skills from our roster of highly performing guest experts. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbprou.com.
Good evening and welcome to Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business. This is your host, Andrew Frazier. Excited to be hanging out with you once again, talking on my favorite subject, small business. As you know, each week we have a special guest and we really just talk about key things that you need to know as an entrepreneur and business owner. At the end of the day, to be a successful leader, a successful business person, it's going to depend on your leadership skills. Your business can only go as far as you're prepared to take it. So that's why we do this show every week, bringing you successful leaders, entrepreneurs, business owners, thought leaders, sharing their expertise in ways that can help you become a better leader and become more successful. So welcome. Thanks for joining us and looking forward to a great evening. Hello from North Carolina. Thanks, Doc. I'm here in Pittsburgh instead of New Jersey, and my guest's out of Canada. So we're already an international show, and we got more people coming from more places. So definitely thanks for tuning in. As always, we appreciate your comments. Feel free to ask questions as well. And, you know, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, definitely you may want to, so you can know what's going on upcoming, as well as see previous episodes of Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business. So really looking forward to this evening's guest. We've had a chance to chat about some things and really the future of where leadership and successful small businesses are going. So today my guest is Lynn Martin. He's a leading authority in the space of asynchronous leadership and management, which is really the wave of the future, or really how business is being done more and more, especially since the pandemic. And developing your skills in this area will be extremely valuable and helpful in terms of your future success in your business. So now I'd like to just invite Liam Martin. Hey, Liam, how you doing tonight?
I'm great. How are you, Andrew?
Excellent. So thanks again for joining in and taking time out of your busy schedule. You know, it's great to hang out in the evening, but, you know, definitely sometimes you may have other things you do in the evening too, as I do. But I like to take time for this because, one, I enjoy it, but also I know, guests in the audience find it valuable. So that's really what it's all about. So
for sure. Yeah, I should have actually brought a drink. That's a little bit harder than tea, but I'm in to talk about everything and anything connected to remote work and asynchronous management.
Okay, excellent. So before we get started, I know you, but the audience doesn't. So maybe if you take a few minutes to talk a little bit about your journey, how you sort of progressed and developed and ended up in the space where you are. I think everybody's in a different place than they were 2 years ago.
Sure.
That's going to continue to change faster and faster. So yeah, if you want to take a few minutes, that would be great.
Sure. So I think, as you had mentioned, Andrew, I am indeed from Canada, and I'm currently in Canada right now. I started my journey almost 20 years ago in Canada at a university in Montreal, Canada, called McGill University. And I ended up teaching, I went to graduate school there and ended up teaching a course. And for those of you that don't know, that are listening, most first and second year courses are actually taught by graduate students. They're not taught by professors. And so I taught that first class. I was super excited about it. Started with 300 students, ended up with less than 200, and got the worst academic reviews in the history of the department. I remember walking into my supervisor's office and I said, I don't think I'm very good at this. And he said, no, you are not. So I said, well, what do you think I should do next? He said, you got to get pretty good at this teaching thing for the next 10 to 20 years before you get to do anything fun. So either figure out what to do on that side or figure out a new career. So 6 weeks later, I threw a master's thesis under his door and I was out into the real world. And that's where I really doubled down on my entrepreneurial journey. I built the first online business that I built was an online tutoring business. Built that to a couple dozen tutors throughout North America and through Europe. And the thing that kind of popped up for me at that point was another source of stress, which was I was working 14 to 16 hours a day, trying to keep that company together. I was building the business. I was in the business instead of actually like working on the business, which is two separate things that I think a lot of people kind of think are the same, unfortunately. And ended up really going through a bit of a transformation, which we can talk about, and realized that for me, remote work was the only avenue that I could take that could allow me to be able to scale a business effectively while also still having some vestige of a life. So after that, I started a couple software companies, timedoctor.com, which is time tracking tool for remote teams, staff.com, which is time analytics for remote teams, and then also running Remote, which is the largest conference on building and scaling remote teams. I like remote teams quite a bit. And in the last year and a half, I've been working on a book, which is coming out August 16th, which is the one thing that everyone should have done during the pandemic when they started working remotely that no one really paid attention to because they didn't understand that there was an entire industry of people that had been world-class at building and scaling remote teams. And this book unlocks that one particular secret.
Okay, excellent. So now you can't say this one thing that you need to know and not tell us. So we'll definitely get into that as we go. But I'm definitely excited about that,
right.
Learning that, sharing that. You said a few interesting things. So you originally wanted to be a teacher and found that wasn't the right fit.
Yeah,
but
I think that entrepreneurship is actually something that people are born with. I don't think it's something that they develop, unfortunately. And I think I had to come out as an entrepreneur. So before I entered grad school, I actually started a sporting goods company that I ended up selling because I didn't have enough money to be able to go to grad school. So I sold that business to be able to get the cash that I needed to be able to do grad school properly. And I was really kind of broken up about this because I thought to myself, and I thought, this is the right decision. It's a smart decision to be able to build, to be able to go to school and get a graduate degree and all this kind of stuff and forget about these stupid little business that I have on the side. When in reality, that actually was my calling. That's what I should have done with my life. And I should have continued on with that. And thankfully I learned my lesson. More specifically, those students taught me the lesson, which is don't do this. You're horrible at it.
Right. But every stage in life is important. And sometimes you learn more from the stages where you weren't as successful as you would have liked to have been.
Absolutely.
So I think that's key. But definitely, I work with different people, and part of it is succession planning. And one of the gentlemen I work with, he sold his business and was disappointed after the fact. And I don't know if you're familiar with Bill Warfalow, who wrote Built to Sell, but he interviewed millions of businesses and valued them. And, they say that, it was like almost 80% of people who sell their businesses are not happy after the fact. Well, whether it's the price or the change in their life or whatever. So, it's hard. And
there's another really great book called The Second Climb, which I think deals with that quite well. It's a story of a football player that wins the big competition in the United States, which escapes me because I'm Canadian. We have the Grey Cup in Canada for football, the Super Bowl. So he wins the Super Bowl and he has a nervous breakdown that evening because he's realized everything he's done up until that point has been to support that singular moment. And when he achieved the summit, he recognized that he had nowhere else to go in his life. So the book is about that second climb, how he pulled himself back together and recognized that really the challenge is what most people are interested in, taking on a load and being able to deal with that stress on a consistent basis is actually counterintuitively what makes you the happiest in your life. And most people in the moment, they don't recognize that when they're working really hard at something, but they love what they're doing, that's their happiest moment. It's not when you sell your business. It's the grind up. That's really where you get a lot of those results. And most people don't kind of recognize that, unfortunately. And I know for me, because I've already had a couple exits in my life, you should always have more eggs in different baskets. Always figure out your next thing before you sell what you currently have or move on to something else, because otherwise you're going to have an existential crisis.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. I've had some transitions, but it's about the journey. And it takes a little while to really figure that out, but you're definitely correct. So, we have digressed a little. So let's bring it back to asynchronous. So, we want to talk about asynchronous and really, before we can really talk about it, I think everybody needs to know what it is. So talk a little bit about what it means.
Well, that one secret that I was telling everyone about is asynchronous management, which is the ability to be able to manage people without directly interacting with them. So if you're watching this live right now, we are effectively communicating synchronously. So you could write a comment and you could ask me a question, and then I can respond to that question live. Most remote teams, counterintuitively, do not actually have a synchronous management philosophy. So I'll give you the context of our company. We have workers in 43 different countries all over the world. And for us, the ability to be able to communicate with those people synchronously is effectively impossible. So instead of focusing on synchronous management, we instead orient ourselves towards asynchronous management, which is communicating through video and that's recorded that people can watch later, through project management systems, through email, through instant messaging, not through the 8-hour Zoom calls that unfortunately everyone experienced during the pandemic. A really good analogy that I can give everyone for asynchronous management is think about, and maybe I'm dating myself on this one, but think to yourself about before platforms like Netflix and Hulu existed, and the channels that you would have where at 8:30 p.m. on a Friday, Friends might come on as the TV show. And then you say to yourself, okay, well, if I'm there at 8:35, I've already missed 5 minutes of that episode. And I can only watch the last 25 minutes, and I've got to wait an entire year until the reruns pop up to be able to watch those first 5 minutes. That's synchronous management. Asynchronous management is like Netflix. So the content, the information is available for you to consume when you are prepared to consume it. And this creates an environment where you can build and scale your organization as fast as you want, because there are a couple components of asynchronous management we can get into that are inside of the book that allow for you to be able to build a business where, I probably spend 2 to 3 hours on synchronous communication on Zoom calls per week. And the other 38 to 37 hours per week, I just work on really difficult problems and interesting problems inside of the business.
Okay. So no, that makes sense. So it's really doing things, really how, when, and what you want to do, as opposed to just living directly in the moment. Would you say that?
Yes. Yeah, I would definitely say that. So what I usually focus on is there's no immediacy inside of asynchronous management. There's no one saying, we need to do this now. You need to talk to me now. We need to do a phone call now, because asynchronous organizations have processes and systems built around them that create an environment where the manager ceases to actually be the individual the vast majority of the time and starts to become the platform. So the platform is actually the project management system, the wiki, the process documents. They actually become where you get your answers as opposed to individuals. And then that allows any organization to say to themselves, well, I'd really love to train 300 people, but I don't have the managers to be able to do it. Inside of async, I only have the managers to manage 30 people. With asynchronous processes and systems, you can train an unlimited amount of people, and more specifically, you can manage many more people because of just the way that those systems are structured. So one of the most interesting things that we found for the book was that asynchronous organizations had a managerial layer that was on average 50% thinner than its on-premise counterparts. So there are more people doing work inside of asynchronous organizations than there are people managing people doing work inside of asynchronous organizations. This creates an environment where more people can do more work as opposed to managing work, which means that you move faster as an organization.
Okay. So, it makes me think of like a couple things. One is the 4 quadrants. I don't know if you're familiar but
I know of some 4 quadrants, but
okay.
I don't know which specifically ones you're referring
generally
to.
The 4 time quadrants.
Okay.
So, the goal is to be working on things that are important but not urgent. But most people end up working on things that are important and urgent, or not important and urgent. So they don't end up spending the majority of the time on the things that are going to move their business forward, because they're usually important but not urgent.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think inside of asynchronous organizations, one of the base documents is a book by my friend Cal Newport called Deep Work. Mm-hmm. And he coined this term to really kind of create an environment in which you have everything at your disposal to be able to solve a very difficult problem. And the most important part of that definition is everything at your disposal. So if you need to complete a task, but you have barriers in front of you, like my manager has that information, I need to ask my manager that question. My coworkers have that information, I need to ask my coworkers, or some of my direct reports have that information, I need to get it from them. Then you can't actually sit down and accomplish the task. If, however, all of that information is asynchronous, meaning it's all documented somewhere, it's written down, then the ability for you as an individual to self-assemble the answer to your own question is actually goes up by a considerable margin. So you can work on these problems that were historically pretty much out of your control, where you could say, hey, I wish I could solve this problem, but I'm not actually empowered to do it because I don't have all those things available to me. Inside of asynchronous management, it's effectively deep work at scale, where the entire organization acts in a autonomous way, meaning every single individual is an autonomous node inside of the system, as opposed to being interlinked dependencies inside of the organization. And I'm not saying that being dependent upon others is a good or a bad thing. In some cases, it's actually a really good thing. But in general, you want to be able to get as much work done independently as you possibly can before you bother other people with your questions. Inside of asynchronous organizations, they have a philosophy with regards to management, which is, and I've heard this multiple times, always respond with a link. So if someone asks a question, don't answer their question, respond with a link to the process document that exists that answers their question for them, therefore training them to recognize that they should have actually gone out and literally queried the wiki or their own process documents on their own, as opposed to taking the lazy way, which is just saying, hey, Andrew, how do I open up HubSpot? Hey, Andrew, how do I set up my Google Pixel? How do I, set up my Facebook tracking? How do I set up my LinkedIn contacts page, which Andrew just did for me right before we ended up jumping on for this call? If I was working for you, Andrew, you probably should have actually redirected me to the process document on how to be able to set up my LinkedIn profile properly.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think definitely, I guess, there's a few things that have to happen in order to have an organization that can be asynchronous.
Absolutely.
And, one of the things you talked about was like the free flow of information. A lot of organizations, information's power to certain people
Yes.
who only make it available when it's in their best interest. But that hurts the whole organization.
Yeah, so I like to call that sacred knowledge, because it's that information that you're absolutely right. Certain individuals have that information to hold power over others. And it also makes them unfireable, right? And the problem with that philosophy, to be completely honest with you, and I'll give you a story that alludes to this perfectly. During the pandemic, there was a woman that I was researching for the book, and she would do payroll for a bunch of lawyers. And they had her do payroll in a bank vault because they had been doing payroll for, this law firm is very, very old, hundreds of years. And so she's processing payroll in this bank vault, and they would lock her into the bank vault to do her payroll. And she hated it. And then when the pandemic happened, she said, I can't go into the bank vault to be able to do payroll. How are we going to do payroll? And she was forced into evolving the payroll process to a point in which it was shareable for everyone. So she no longer had that sacred knowledge. She needed to distribute that sacred knowledge and share it with everyone. And what happened when everything opened back up? Well, she was let out of the bank vault. She was allowed to be able to run payroll outside of that environment. But more importantly, she actually recognized that once she was free from that sacred knowledge, she could start to work on more interesting problems inside of the business. And that's what she did. So she literally went from payroll taking her 30 hours per week to payroll taking her 3 hours per week. And now she does a bunch of other things inside of the business. I could guarantee you, if you're an employee inside of a company right now, if you turn a job that takes 30 hours into 3 hours per week, your employer is going to love you for it, and they're going to give you other opportunities to be able to build more interesting stuff inside of those companies.
No, great example. Of course, it has to be the right type of organization, led by the right type of person also. But in this environment, everybody needs to be entrepreneurial to move forward. And that's a great example, either entrepreneurial or intrapreneurial. So definitely that's a great example. So we're talking about asynchronous management. I mentioned a little bit about my university, Small Business Pro University, which actually features multimedia asynchronous learning opportunities. And we run this as well as many of my other programs through the university. So let's just take a second to see a little bit more about the university. I got a 1-minute video, and then we'll be back talking small business.
Do you own your business, or does it own you? Is your business growing, and are you making enough money? As a business owner, there are so many things you need to know to become more successful. Hello, my name is Andrew Frazier, the Business Growth Pro and CFO. I created the Small Business Pro University for you. Small Business Pro University has self-paced, dynamic, multimedia learning experiences created by more than 20 instructors who are business owners just like you. Small Business Pro University will empower you to become a masterpreneur by learning the secrets to creating a successful enterprise, to go from working in your business to working on your business. Take advantage of our strategic coaching program, or just simply choose the courses that you need. At www.sbprou.com, we will empower you to thrive and not just survive, and make more money in any business environment.
Okay, welcome back to Leadership Live at 8:05, talking small business. I'm here hanging out with Lynn, and we're talking about asynchronous management. So, one thing that our conversation reminds me of is, one of the key books that I have mostly all business owners that I work with read. I'm not sure if you could guess what that is, but
is it E-Myth?
There you go, E-Myth
Yeah.
Revisited. So,
Yes.
Talk a little bit about how that matches up with what you're talking about.
Well, that's the second core tenet of asynchronous management, which is democratized workflows. So you need to be able to build processes that are created from essentially a bottom-up approach. I think one of the big things that the E-Myth doesn't necessarily nail properly is, if you build process documentation inside of your organization, how do you actually weed that process document? So those things can become absolutely enormous. The largest one in existence right now that I've found is GitLabs, which is an asynchronous organization that was also interviewed for the book. And if you go to about.gitlab.com/handbook, they have 9,800 entries into their process document. It's entirely open source. You can steal all of the information that you want from that organization. They encourage you to. But the issue is, if you have a 9,000 entry process document, how are you actually going to effectively weed that and make sure that everyone's getting their fair, getting up-to-date information? So we really do it from a bottom-up approach, meaning it's really important, once a process is in place, that process is law, and you can amend the law, but you can't not pay attention to it. If you do the opposite of what the law is, that is illegal and you will be reprimanded for it. So you need to actually change the law and change the processes. So we use a wiki system inside of our organization. A lot of other asynchronous organizations do the same, where if you go to any Wikipedia entry right now, you'll be able to get the direct entry. And then if you flip the page, there's another tab that not many people know about, and it's the debate about that actual entry. So there's a huge conversation going on saying, hey, I believe that snow is black, not white, as an example. And that person will be very quickly outvoted, and you'll be able to come to the truth. So we have that inside of the organization, and we monetarily reward all of our employees inside of the company to be able to amend that process document. So there actually are team members inside of our organization where about 20% of their salary literally just comes from updating the process documents, because they know that actually makes them that extra cash that they need inside of the organization. And it's a really easy way to be able to encourage other people to be able to build process documents as well. So if you've done nothing up until right now, you do not have a single process document written, if you go to our website, runningremotebook.com, we have 40 templates templates of the first process document every single person should write, which is how to do my job. It's a 5-page document. You can link out to other sources, but we tell people to keep it under 5 pages. It takes about an afternoon for every single employee in your organization to be able to write that document. And then when you get it, you take it and you give it to someone that's not in their department. So if they're a designer, as an example, send it to an engineer. If they're an engineer, send it to a marketer. And then that person has to actually figure out whether or not they understand that process document, whether they understand it at least from a layman's perspective. And that's your first beta version of your process document, because so many people are scared about that process. But if you actually just spend that single afternoon, you'll at least have that beta version of how to build your processes, throw it into a wiki, and you're off to the races.
Okay. All right. So, so now for us non-techie people, what's a wiki and how does that work?
Sure. So a wiki was started from the organization Wikipedia. And so it's, basically a wiki is a way of collating information and also discussing the validity of those different pieces of information. So every page has the entry, and then it has the debate about that entry. That's literally what it is. So it's a very simple way for people. And if you're not interested in building a wiki, they're open source and they're free. So you can literally deploy them whenever you want. Google Docs is a really easy way to be able to do it, because you're going to be able to have you'll be able to have discussions inside of that Google Doc, and you'll be able to see those discussions and how they're evolving. And then another really good paid tool that I suggest that people check out is Trainual.com, which is a process document tool. I think it costs $1 per user per month to be able to have process documents literally inside of your organization, hardwired in, and more importantly, you can even have quizzes and tests at the end of those process documents so that you know that everyone's qualified on the information that you have inside of the organization. Okay.
So, definitely, technology enables a lot of this. Historically, it was a lot more complex, especially for smaller organizations, to be able to do that sort of stuff. And you mentioned, the E-Myth, it's a great book, but he did write it 30, 40 years ago. So technology is a little different now, but at least some of the premises and some of the perspectives that he shares in the book, I think are very powerful. And one of his premises is, you really use the processes so that you have consistency, and so that you don't have to have superstars to be successful. You really need to have people who follow the processes and procedures.
Yeah, inside of asynchronous organizations, we take that step one tiny step further, which is anyone in an asynchronous organization should not own a position. They should currently inhabit a position. So I am not the CMO of the company. I currently inhabit the position of the CMO of the company. And when you think in that context, if you are currently inhabiting that position, you're in a hotel room and you're currently inhabiting a hotel room every single evening, you should be able to leave that position any single day, right? So at any moment, anyone in the organization could get, heaven forbid, hit by a bus. And then the process documents that are left over allow for that individual's direct reports to be able to solve for that position and hopefully hire someone else to be able to take on that position quickly and easily. So really important that people inhabit positions, don't necessarily own them.
Okay. So now, to do that, we're talking about management and really leadership. This doesn't happen by itself. What does a leader have to do, or how does a leader do something like that? Because
well, here's the good part on leadership. Asynchronous organizations were really born out of a group of individuals that I would definitely define as introverted. So I think that asynchronous organizations, and more specifically remote work, is going to lead to the rise of the introverted leader. So asynchronous organizations, you don't necessarily have to have that, 6'5" Captain America, ultra charismatic leader to be able to run your organization. Instead, and I'm not one of those people, I'm the wallflower that sits in the meeting and doesn't necessarily say 3 words over a 90-minute meeting. And then I just leaves thinking, why was I in a 90-minute meeting? I should have probably done something else with my time. And while that's happening, 6'5" Captain America guy is the guy that's just talking 90% of the time. What we've discovered is, even though that person may not have the best ideas, that individual's ideas are generally the ones that are adopted the most inside of those organizations. Not because their ideas are good, but because they're charismatic and they can convince other people in order to be able to basically adopt their ideas. This is a net negative inside of an organization. Just because you're good at arguing your point doesn't necessarily mean that you have good points, right? So the wallflower like me that may have much better ideas or may know that problem way better than that other individual can't actually argue it because I just don't have the skills in order to be able to do it. But I do have that when I'm asynchronous, because I can get onto my Asana project management system or my Trello project management system, and I can discuss my issue and I can discuss my point of view and I can convince people asynchronously when I have time to sit and think about that particular issue. And that's the piece that is such a massive game changer when you look at asynchronous organizations and how they're currently evolving. I don't have data on this, unfortunately, but from my qualitative instrumentation that I've been doing and interviewing that I've been doing with companies, I've discovered that people make less bad decisions simply because they have charisma bias coming from people that are just very inspiring individuals that can debate and discuss their points super well, but they're not usually right the majority of the time. The actual experts are the ones that are right the majority of the time, but they're internet nerds like me that are sitting there not actually able to discuss those points. So the rise of the introverted leader, to me, means how can you inspire people asynchronously? How can you write more eloquently? How can you communicate effectively? And that doesn't just mean through text. That means through audio formats. That means through communicating a really fantastic video. We spend a lot of time and resources on making an incredibly inspiring video every single month for the 200 people inside of our organization, to be able to tell them where we're going as a company and why they should be able to continue to spend their time, the majority of their day, working on this exciting problem, or at least the problem that we find exciting. So we spend that time and we try to inspire asynchronously, and it has a fantastic result. We have an ENPS, which is Employee Net Promoter Score, which is just a way of measuring employee engagement that almost all organizations have as a core metric. We have an ENPS score of 76. I actually just checked it this quarter. The average asynchronous organization has an ENPS of 70. And the average ENPS score in all companies throughout North America is 35. So the average asynchronous organization has an ENPS score double what everyone else has. That is an absolute game changer. People love remote work because they feel like they are more included, and Captain America doesn't steal their ideas from them.
Okay.
Even though I wish Captain America would, I don't want to kind of go after the Captain Americas of the world. They're very, very important people. They're fantastic salespeople. I would definitely keep them in your organizations for those purposes. But most asynchronous organizations at this point, that charismatic defense of one's ideas is no longer as important as it was in the past.
Okay. No, that's a good point. Actually, even though I do outsource CFO work, the numbers are really 20% of what I actually do for people. because the biggest piece is the leadership, the management, and how to interact with people and more effectively and influence them. And one of the key things in that division is many times many business owners they're more they usually think really fast, want to move, but some people if you ask them something, they can't really respond until they've had time to think about it. So Captain America could be in the meeting and be like, this is great, this is great, and the other people are they're thinking about it, so they don't say anything, and then you end up doing the wrong thing, or possibly not, or not taking into account vital information because you didn't give people the chance to process things the way they process it.
Or the part that I think is really important for people to recognize is Captain America may intimidate a whole bunch of people, and they may not want to give their honest opinion just because they're intimidated, because they think to themselves, I can't even go toe to toe with you because you're way better at exploring and defending your point of view than I'm capable of doing. And in this synchronous environment, I'm not going to be able to get my point across. But in an asynchronous environment, you have a much better chance. We basically say that ideas have a better chance inside of asynchronous organizations, which is generally going to be bad for Captain America, but very, very good for your organization.
So, definitely very, very interesting perspective. So yeah, we've been covering some good stuff. Definitely a few more things to cover, but the time goes pretty quick. Even though you're up in Canada, if you need to get away and come to the New York area, end of July might be a good time, because one thing that I do is quarterly power breakfasts and conferences for entrepreneurs and business owners. So the next one we have is on July 29th, Power Breakfast and Conference. We started in Newark, New Jersey, and we're back in Newark, New Jersey for our 10th anniversary. And, over those 10 years, we've helped people get millions of dollars in financing, economic growth, and we've had over 1,500 people in attendance. So wow. You are always welcome. I have an invitation, and everybody out there, check it out. And just to see a little bit about what the Power Breakfast is, there's a 60-second commercial, and then we'll be back talking small business.
Do you own your business, or does it own you? Is your business...
Actually, that's the wrong one.
If you are looking to increase revenues, improve profitability, and or obtain financing for your business, you need to check out the Power Breakfast and Small Business Pro conferences.
My name is Andrew Frazier. One of the things we're here to do is supercharge your day.
Today's Power Breakfast has really been a phenomenal experience. I think it's exactly what business owners need, some true guidance of people who are genuine and really are leading them in the true direction of business growth and expansion.
The Power Breakfast is so important for the entrepreneurial community because it gives the various business people who come together an opportunity to interact and also do some business.
These events, hosted by Andrew Frazier, President and COO of Small Business Like a Pro, will supercharge your day.
Okay. Welcome back to Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business. Here with Liam, and definitely, if you're available, I put it in the chat. You can learn more about the events, and you're welcome to join us. Also, we will be live streaming some of the sessions, so it's an opportunity to get access to some business thought leaders and some valuable information for entrepreneurs and business owners. So,
I think Newark is quite possibly the place that I've been to the most in the United States, but I've never been out of the airport.
okay, got you.
I probably am in Newark 20 times a year because
Okay.
it's the transit hub for United. And I it's funny that I've never actually stepped out of the airport before. Maybe I will come down and
Okay.
actually step out of that airport for the first
Yeah,
time ever.
you could sneak over and hang out with us for a little bit in
Yeah,
between.
if there's a good layover that I
layovers.
could pick up for about 6 or 7 hours, then I can go and check it out.
Yeah. So cool. Yeah, no, Newark's got a great airport. A lot of good things going on there. So yes, I mean, we've been talking about a lot of key stuff. Now you've written your book. What led you to write your book, and what was the most challenging part of writing it?
Oh boy. Well, so the reason why I wrote the book was the first 3 months of the pandemic. So just to kind of give everybody context, February of 2020, 4% of the US workforce was working remotely. By March, 45% of the US workforce was working remotely. That's the biggest transition in work since the Industrial Revolution. But the Industrial Revolution took about 80 years, and we did that in March. So a complete transition of everything that we've understood as it applies to work. And even today, we're sitting at about 33% of the US workforce working remotely, with less than 10% of those employees saying that they're doing it due to COVID. So we're effectively past that point. That about 30% of the population is going to stay remote forever. And the numbers are actually popping back up, which is a very exciting time. So the reason why I wrote that book is because within the first couple months of the pandemic, everyone was asking me, Liam, how do you work remotely? Liam, how do you work remotely? I remember getting a call from a G7 country. There's only 7 of those, so there's only you can think about who that might have been. And they said, we just moved hundreds of thousands of employees remote yesterday. How do you actually do this at scale? And I said, I have no idea, because we only have a couple hundred people in the company. And I said, isn't there someone else that you can talk to? And they said, you're the first person that was able to pick up the phone. So I realized at that point that we needed to be able to get a way to, I felt like everyone was drowning and I only had one life preserver at a time to be able to put on to everybody. So I thought that this book would be an excellent way to be able to show people that remote work is not 8-hour work days. It's not living at work, right? Remote work isn't living at work, or working from home isn't living at work. It's actually being able to work the way that you want to work. I am currently at my cottage, as an example, up in northern Canada. I sometimes work in my own personal office. I work at a co-working space. I work at coffee shops. This is the real truth about remote work. And for me, this is the kind of promise that remote work is really going to give to everyone. So I recognize that the best way I could help with that is to be able to write this book and get into as many people's hands as humanly possible. The hardest part of writing the book was honestly writing the book. So it was easily the most difficult single creative project I've ever done in my entire life. It was supposed to take a year. It took a year and 6 months, and lots of rewrites, lots of interviewing people. It was, I'm never going to say never, but the chance of me writing another book in the future is almost zero.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see what happens, because I wrote my first book in 2018 called Running Your Small Business Like a Pro. It took me 5 years to write it. Wow. But I've written 2 since, and I'm working on 3 right now. So,
oh wow.
One, you may find that you like, especially you had a teaching interest. It may just be, and what I've found is it makes you so much better at what you do. So, writing the book helps other people, but it also helps make you way better at what you do, because if you take a class and learn something, you sort of know it. If you use what you learned in your class, you know it a little better. If you teach it, you got to know it way better because you got to be able to answer questions about it. But if you write a book, you got to know it the next level better because you got to answer the questions before they even ask them. So this really helps you to really think things through in a way that you wouldn't otherwise never have to, and gives you a lot of really powerful insights. So I encourage you to not make this your last book because I think you'll find value in the process.
Yeah, it's just I could remember I have a copy editor that I've worked very, very well with, and I was sitting on a page for an entire day, and I'm talking 6.5 hours of working on a single page. And because we're a remote organization and we're also an asynchronous organization, he was able to actually put a comment in saying, it looks like you're spending a lot of time on this page. What are you trying to figure out? So we ended up I sent him a message saying, I'm trying to kind of figure out this concept of, and I very specifically remember the platform as the manager. But I wasn't actually communicating it that way. I was saying, we have all these project management systems and all this kind of stuff that actually work in tandem to be able to make sure that people can get all of their answers to all of their questions. And then he said, oh, you mean the platform's the manager? And I said, exactly. And then he said, in the future, just describe that to me and I can help you out with it. So that's an example of the type of frustrations that I had. I'm not necessarily as eloquent as someone like Daniel, my copywriter, and or my copy editor, and I would I would not engage in the same project unless I had about 4 or 5 Daniels with me.
Right, but now that you've done that, when you speak, you can speak and communicate way better about what you're doing than otherwise.
Yes, absolutely. I've learned a lot about being concise. Which has been historically one of my problems.
Okay. So, no, that's cool. Time is notoriously fast in the evening, especially when you're talking about small business and you're into small business. So, we're winding down. But one thing I always ask my guests is to really think about what we talked about. We've got entrepreneurs and business owners out here. We talked about a lot of stuff, but usually people can only really focus on up to 3 things at a time. So what would you say they should take away from this and really that they can get started implementing tomorrow or even tonight if they're night owls?
Sure.
So take it if you need a second to think about it, or if you.
No, I think from a tactical perspective, biggest things that you can do is number one, and I'm definitely not trying to push the book here, but number one, go check out the book. It's going to give you a really good framework to be able to understand what to do. But if you want to go super tactical tonight, I would, number one, build that process document, how to do my job. And if you're an entrepreneur inside of your organization, write out the document for yourself, give it to your manager, and encourage your manager in order to be able to actually distribute this throughout their entire team so that you at least have that first version of process documentation in place so that everyone knows what the heck everyone else does and can actually ask questions and understand each other's positions better. The second thing that I would have people do, if they're cool with that, is I like to, so organizations shouldn't go asynchronous all at once. That's a little too scary. What I suggest that people do is try an asynchronous week. So try 1 week, and organizations very quickly go 1 week per month where they do not interact synchronously. They only interact asynchronously. And I got to tell you, I've been doing the survey data on this. Once companies try this, I have not had a single organization that's gone back. They absolutely love it. And most of the time, employees ask for more. And then the third thing that I would suggest that people do is really start to embrace detailed metrics inside of their organization. So everyone inside of the company should have one quantitative metric that's longitudinal that they start to measure, and measure it automatically. So if they can have that data reported into any type of project management system, and then here's the part that's a little bit more difficult for people, which is kind of this is why I have it as the third step, have everyone have access to that information. We call it inside of asynchronous organizations, radical transparency inside of the organization, so that everyone can have access to everyone else's metrics and everyone knows what everyone else is doing. If you can do that, you build out your process documents, you build out your own process document this afternoon, or this evening, you have your asynchronous week that you try to implement, and then you have those metrics and you share them so that everyone else has access to them. You're going to be doing light years better than everyone else in your field.
Okay, excellent. No, those are great points. Not sure if you're familiar with OKCs.
Yes.
Okay, which is Andy Grove, CEO of Intel, or former CEO of Intel. I'm not sure if he's still there. But that's one of the things that made them one of the top performing companies in the world for many, many years straight. So it does work, and it's been proven in many instances. So, you got to start somewhere, and you can't do it all overnight, like you said. So, doing it gradually. But, these are things that can and do work, but you got to have transparency. And that can only happen if that's what the leaders are willing to have happen. So, it has to begin at the top.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, that's the reality of the situation, which is, I think anyone listening right now can build out that process document and they can give it to their manager. And if they're inspired by that, do an asynchronous week, do an asynchronous day, if that's too scary for everybody, and just get that first day in, and then survey people and see whether they like it and whether they'd like to do more. I could guarantee you they'll want to do more. They love it. And then if you can get to that point, you can generally convince management to be able to pick up my book and actually read the third step, which is radical transparency, allowing everyone to have access to everyone else's metrics.
Okay. No, great. We do have a question here from Roberta. Hey, Roberta, how you doing? Thanks for asking.
So does asynchronous management apply to social media, e.g. posting anytime versus posting at a set time? I'm thinking, Roberta, you're referring to how you deploy your posts. And yes, I was talking to Andrew about this beforehand, which is someone else manages my LinkedIn, not me. So all of my LinkedIn posts, I get a message at the beginning of every month, which is, here are the 60 LinkedIn posts that we're thinking about dropping. I scan through them. They all kind of connect. They all sound like things that I would say. And obviously it comes from all of the previous stuff that I've done, the videos, the blog posts that I've written, all that kind of stuff. And then they take that and they turn them into posts. And then they launch them up on my social queue. And it's all done asynchronously. And more importantly, actually, I usually respond to all those messages in a batched way. So I don't get distracted by one LinkedIn message, as an example. I wait until 4 p.m. as an example, and I can sit down and go through all of those messages at one set time so that I'm focused to be able to work on some stuff that's higher leverage. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, great. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for the great answer. So no, this has been good and eye-opening. I think that what you're doing is very important. People need to know more and more about this. The great thing as an entrepreneur is you have the power to create asynchronous management within your organization. You don't have to ask people. So definitely learn as much as you can about it. We didn't really get into this, but maybe we'll just take a minute because we didn't really say much about scaling, but this allows you to scale in a way that you couldn't otherwise scale. So if you could do a quick, just explain what scaling is real quick, and then why this allows you to scale much better than other types of management.
Sure. So it really just comes down to the processes that you've built inside of your organization. So if you have the platform be the manager instead of singular individuals, it creates an environment in which you can say, instead of only having enough managers to be able to train 3 salespeople, I have the process documents, I have the systems in place, and I have the metrics in place to train an unlimited amount of people, 300 people, 3,000 salespeople, all at the same time. We actually do this inside of my companies where we'll train a whole bunch of sales development reps at the same time. And 90% of that training is actually run by our VP of sales that has created video tutorials and training modules, much like what Andrew actually has in his organization, so that everyone can get trained up. And probably that singular manager has to spend maybe 1/10 of the time interacting with those individuals to assess very quickly whether or not that person is going to be a right fit very early on within the first month, without actually investing that much synchronous time. Think of synchronous time as an investment, because it literally is dollars and cents. It's minutes of time that you have to pay for. But once you can turn that information into an asynchronous document, then you can scale that organization, because that asynchronous document is now something that you don't have to pay for every single time in terms of training. You can do it over and over and over again. So it's really magical once you actually get it up and running. I've seen this happen not only in my own organization, but I've interviewed 20 different companies that are all 9 and 10 figure companies that are running asynchronously, and they're all running very easily because they have those processes in place.
Excellent. So no, great explanation. Definitely subscribe to what you're talking about. I think, appreciate you taking the time to spend this evening and share your expertise, and of course, wish you much success in what you're doing. Definitely, if you make it to Newark on the 29th and have a layover, come check us out. And, we'll have to get you back as a guest at some point. So I appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. And if anyone's interested in checking out the book, just go to runningremotebook.com.
Okay.
That's there.
Okay. And you've got the links in the chat to Liam's LinkedIn profile as well as his website. So definitely feel free to reach out to him. Hang on, Liam, for a second as I close out. And once again, thanks for joining us for Leadership Live at 805 Talking Small Business. Each week we have an exciting guest and an exciting topic. And next week we have Casey Carpenter. We're going to talk about the way you speak is the way you lead. She's CEO of Speak and Own It Communications. And really, communication skills are, as a leader, your most important skill, because that's really how you influence people. And so she's going to talk about some positive ways and how to recognize negative ways that you may be communicating. Because at the end of the day, everybody can improve in that space. But a lot of times, if you haven't been exposed to it or you haven't learned, you may be doing some things that are not helping your situation. So looking forward to talking to Casey next week. And, each week, excited about having you here. As you know, or as you may know, not only are we on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook, we also broadcast live in the metaverse every Tuesday night on STEM City USA. So you can check us out there as well. And so once again, appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. And at the end of the day, we all know that
the more that you know, the faster your business will grow.
Thank you for listening to Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbpro.u.com.